was wondering if I could find children's books about Puerto Rican history and culture in order to teach my kids a little bit more about their heritage. Hi, I'm Leslie Maddox, an engineer turned homeschool mom. I'm in just started my 10th year of homeschooling. I really wanted to turn our homeschool at some point into focusing on that a little bit as part of our history studies. I only lived in Puerto Rico until I was 5 or like just before then. And so we can all learn a lot, you know? So I thought, let me see if I can find some children's books and try them out and read through them and see, do they have any educational value? And how would I use this? What could my kids learn from these books and still enjoy a story? I'm going to go through each of these books, the stack of books here, and then also a couple that I read through Kindle Unlimited. So I'll tell you my thoughts on them and a little bit of a rating of them. So let's take a closer look at these books. So I'll be going through these books in no particular order. This is just the first one I grabbed. It's called Paloma's Song for Puerto Rico. And yes, I know my accent is atrocious for all of you native Spanish speakers. I haven't spoken Spanish fluently since I was a little kid, una niña chiquita. And I was 5 when I learned English and pretty much been speaking English ever since and not Spanish. I'm trying to rectify that now as an adult, but that's a whole other thing. So you're going to hear me saying some Spanish words probably during this video, and don't be offended. Please, I'm trying. I'm trying. Okay, so this is Paloma's Song. And notice this is a Smithsonian book, National Museum of the American Latino. For those who don't know, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. So us Puerto Ricans are American citizens. So anyway, this is a real nice little book. I'm just going to show you what I would look at if I were in a library or in a bookstore looking at it. Here's the cover. Look how pretty. It attracted me right away. I always get a little bit emotional when I'm getting emotional just thinking about it right now. When I see a little Puerto Rican girl, even this drawing, because since I spent all of my school years in American schools and on military bases, I didn't know a lot of Puerto Ricans growing up. And a lot of people, they thought they were being complimentary of me by saying, oh, but you look white. And technically, I am white. There's race and there's ethnicity. I'm Latina. It's not about the color, though. It's about your heritage, and there are differences. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. My point is, while a lot of people felt like I passed for a typical American, even as an adult, I've had that said to me, and I don't like it. Just so you know, no me gusta. I don't like it. I pass for a typical American. Still, whenever I go to Puerto Rico and they're in the airport at baggage claim, and I'm looking around at all the other Puerto Ricans, and I see that these are the people that I look like. Puerto Rico, we're a mixture of indigenous, European, and African ancestry. So we have Puerto Ricans come in all shades from white to dark. But there is a sort of classic look, I feel like. If you're Puerto Rican, let me know if you agree with this. There's a look you'll even see on Law and Order and all sometimes. I saw a Puerto Rican guy. It's like, how do they know he was Puerto Rican? Because there's a look. And so it's just nice to be around people who look like you. Okay, that's my point. Wow, that was really an aside. Anyway, a diary from 1898. So that's what we see on the cover, on the front cover, and on the back, saying witness Latino history through first-person diary tales. So that's how this book is set up, like a journal of this little girl. Created in collaboration with the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino, each story in the series features a young Latino character's experience during key moments in American history. So the key moment here that this is talking about is the Spanish-American War, which is what brought Puerto Rico to become a territory of the United States. So I'd never really thought about before how scary it must have been for the people living in Puerto Rico, where this is something that almost doesn't have to do with them. This war between the United States and Spain, but they're caught up in it. And how scary must it have been for children? I thought this was a really good book. It's done in diary form, which is nice. I imagine maybe while reading through this book, a student could be keeping their own diary for the time that they're reading this book to have that experience, and I also give them practice for date writing. So it's a chapter book, and I think on Amazon it says this is like for 8 to 12 years old, or maybe I think that's where I got that from. And I would say that's correct. This is a book that they could read on their own. It will make a nice read aloud too, but they could read on their own. You can see that there's some Spanish words in here, like querido diario, dear diary. There's some illustrations. This is tiple. Did I get that right? A tiple guitar, and there's different versions of it from different Latin American countries and Spain, I believe. And then there's like a certain Puerto Rican version with a certain number of strings and all, and it's in a particular size. So there's little drawings. Here's the Puerto Rican flag. So the drawings have something to do with an aspect of Puerto Rican culture. There's this, just read a couple of quotes here. Like here, when I was little, I named many of the chickens. They all looked different, and I could tell which one was which. But it isn't wise to get attached to farm animals. Someday, they may become our dinner. I learned that the hard way when one of my favorite chickens was missing from the yard. So it turns out that one of her favorite chickens was in a stew pot. And this reminded me of stories my mother has told me about when she would visit one of her grandmothers and how they lived out rural. Boy, that's hard to say. It's like that show, Third Rock from the Sun. Remember that? The rural juror. Anyway, not Third Rock from the Sun. What was the show? I can't remember. You know the one I'm talking. Hopefully you know the one I'm talking about. I'll put it here if I can remember. Third Rock from the Sun was a whole other thing that was hilarious, but no. They lived out in the country, is what I'm trying to say. My mother's family. And so they had chickens, and she would tell me about like her grandmother butchering a chicken and all and cooking it up, and how she would put like the little feet on the side of her plate. And that was like an extra like delicacy or something. So anyway, that reminded me of that. And so for me personally, this had a little bit extra charm because it reminded me of things that my mother had told me. And then they're on the coffee farm. So if you're trying to focus on the education of it, educational aspect, there's things like that that you can learn. Delve into the economy of Puerto Rico and that kind of thing. I like this quote as well. I went outside and filled my basket with a large ripe yucca and some plump tomatoes from the vines. The mango tree was bearing fruit as well, so I picked a few from the branches and then delivered the basket to mommy. And so you see here, you learn about not just the agriculture, like through the coffee farm and all, but the flora of Puerto Rico, which is something I love. So anyway, as far as education goes, I would rate it like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd rate it a 9. The quality of the writing, I'd say it was an 8 because it did keep you interested. Like I was eager to see what was going to happen during this conflict. And there's this moments where they didn't know where her father was and he get caught up in the conflict. And so I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to be one of these books where a parent dies? And no, it was not. Spoiler alert, too late. Anyway, had some nice things. Like I like this, what I highlighted here, this quote here: Puerto Ricans are brave. Our indigenous and African ancestors overcame a lot of suffering. Oh my gosh, this gets me emotional. Our indigenous and African ancestors overcame a lot of suffering, both enslaved. Their blood runs in us. In the crops we plant, the foods we eat, the music we play, so much in our culture is a gift from them. I need to hold my head high. For that quote alone, I was like, my kids are reading this book or I'm reading it to them. The writing was good. Maybe I forgot about that quote. Maybe I should give it a 9, but I gave it an 8 just because it was really good. It wasn't all as poetic as it's a kid's book. So I gave it an 8. As far as interest goes, I gave it a 9 because you were wanting to know what was going to happen next. Is her father okay? What was it going to be like for the family afterwards? And so the ending of the book does get into that, and this gives you a little bit of a hint. I would give it overall the rating of 8.7, and I would give it a thumbs up. All right, next book. The Magical Closet Mystery, a Puerto Rican adventure. I was attracted to this book because of this beautiful cover. And I want you to notice that each of these kids looks different. This is the thing about Puerto Ricans that I love, um, that we have so many different types of ancestry running through our veins that we can all look very different from each other. And they call that out in this book because these are all siblings. This book, it's a chapter book. It does also have some illustrations and a lot of little extras. So we have here these little call outs that talk about their like explanations of Spanish words, like here dulces, or they could be explanations of cultural concepts, like lelolai, a phrase often used in poetry or song reminding Puerto Ricans of their beloved island. And then you have these QR codes. There's a couple of songs. It says somewhere on here. Let's look at the back of this. Bonuses include 2 original songs that readers, sorry, seeing a reflection of the light there. 2 original songs that readers can access through scannable QR codes. I thought that was really neat the way they use the internet and all to do all that. So back to it being a chapter book. I'd say it's upper elementary for reading, but for interest, I'd say it's a little more lower to mid elementary. So this book may be better as a read aloud. I don't know, some, 5th graders so might like it to read it themselves. I'm certainly going to try having my youngest read it himself and see if it keeps his interest. But I think it might work a little better as a read aloud. I will give you a trigger warning about this book. It does deal with the death of a parent. And so that's a bit of a sad aspect of this book. As far as education goes, I gave it a rating of 9 because I love these call outs that give it a little more explanation of things. In this book, we learn a little bit about the mythology of the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, which we call them the Tainos. They were, I believe, a branch of the Arawak Indians or Native Americans. It does talk a little bit about modern culture of Puerto Rico, more modern culture of Puerto Rico. And so I thought this was a much more an educational book in a different way. There's a little more variety. So I gave it a 9, a rating of 9 for that. The quality of the writing, I give a 9 because it's more like a typical novel. And there's some humor and on here. It's more like a typical writing of a kid's book. As far as interest goes, I gave it a 7 because the premise of this magical closet and all, it's been done. And I wasn't real invested in the story. I am 50 years old. So I'm not exactly the target audience, but um, I wasn't as invested. I was trying to picture would my kids be real invested in this story. I don't know. I gave the interest a 7. And so an overall rating of 8.3 for that. All right, next book. Good Night, Puerto Rico. And this may remind you of Good Night Moon. And I believe it's meant to. I think they have a whole series of Good Night books. Do I need to turn off? I may need to turn off the light for this one. It still works. All right, so Good Night Puerto Rico. So this is a book that's geared more for toddlers or preschoolers. You may see Good Night Puerto Rico and think, oh, I loved all those thousands of nights I read Good Night Moon to my child. Maybe I'll have that same experience. Or you may think, oh my gosh, I cannot deal with another Good Night book. I was in between on those. However, when you look inside, look at this artwork. It is just gorgeous. And these first 2 pages had me. This is Old San Juan. And we actually stayed in Old San Juan last time we were there. And this is a lot of what it looks like now. It's not quite as brightly colored buildings. It's beautiful. Both of my sisters had their weddings in Old San Juan and got some beautiful pictures, wedding pictures because of that. And so this book has a lot of variety and different things it covers. It covers things like cultural concepts, places, things you'll see in Puerto Rico like the piraguas. This is El Morro, and there's an area there which I highly recommend you go there if you go to Puerto Rico. I could have spent longer there last time we went. And there's an area there where I think you can buy kites and fly kites and all. And Yunque, although since the hurricanes, they've had some issues there. Culebra, there's a couple little islands around Puerto Rico. There's caves that you can go to. We did go to some caves last time. I'm not sure if it was this one. Baseball is a huge sport in Puerto Rico. And this, I didn't even know about this in Ponce because I haven't spent much time in Ponce. It's on the southern part of the island. So if you're looking for an experience like Goodnight Moon, it's not really that. So you might be disappointed or you might be excited, depending on how you felt about Goodnight Moon. It does have a lot of variety when it comes to aspects of Puerto Rico it covers, but very super surface level, obviously. So for education, because of the variety, I give it a 5. It's so super surface level that I really didn't feel like I could give it higher than a 5. But it might get you started. It could be a little bit of a spine for, hey, let's learn more about Rincon. And let's learn more about Piraguas. Delicious. Quality of the writing is going to be 4. I said that because I wish it'd be a little bit more like Goodnight Moon because I feel like that's what they're telling you you're going to get, and that's not what you're getting. So I gave that a 4. Interest, I gave it a 6 because it's so beautifully done, so colorful, but because it's so super surface level, and since it's not like Good Night Moon and kids might expect that, I gave it a 6. So overall, a rating of a 5 for this book. All right, next one. Puerto Rico Treasure Quest, a search and find book. So this one was a little bit different. This is another board book. Maybe I need to raise this a little higher. Let's see. Okay, this is another board book, as you can see. So it's more for like preschool, kindergarten. This one, first one with an actual map, which I was excited to see. I always love to see a map of Puerto Rico. And we get here some details about the flag and the capital. So this is meant to be super educational in that way. This has more exploration of cultural concepts. So they'll say, can you find the piragua, which is a shaved ice dessert? So look here, here's the guy selling the piraguas. And obviously this is in Old San Juan. Can you find and I don't know what this is, Vejigante mask? I had never heard of this before. So who knows? Can you find the pasteles? Pasteles. Oh, so yummy. Right here. There's the pasteles. So delicious. So anyway, the artwork here is a little bit for older kids. And there's a little more detailed. There's these did you knows. And then there's a little searching for things. Oh, this one talks about the bioluminescent bay. They say in Vieques. I actually went to a bioluminescent bay, which there's only a few in the world and a couple of them in Puerto Rico. And this is not the one that I went to. But that's a really cool thing to learn about. So this is another one you can use as a spine to learn maybe each day, look at a couple of pages and then learn a little bit more about it. Watch a video, look up some stuff in the encyclopedia. So it's a beautiful book. Let's see, how did I rate this? So for education, I rated it a 7. I love the map and that there's a little bit more of the explanation of the cultural concepts. For the quality of the writing, I gave it a 4 because it's just really straightforward, which is fine. It's just, there's nothing wrong with straightforward, especially when you're trying to teach something. But the writing isn't the reason you're going to get this book. There is some rhyming. I thought it was a little bit cringy, but typical for a kid's book, I guess. Interest level, I gave it a 6. I don't know. I'm wondering if I should have rated that higher. I think that I rated it a 6 for how colorful it is, the looking for something on each page. But I think sometimes, like this, the pasteles. If you don't know what pasteles are, like you're not gonna know what word is on here. I think it might be frustrating for kids when they're like, how am I supposed to know where a pastel? If you tell them, can you find a tennis ball? Like they could probably find that, but a pastele. So Here's a map on the back. I'm looking to see, is there an answer key here? Okay, so I guess this is like the answer key um, to show you what each of these things are. So that might be a little frustrating for kids if they're like, how am I supposed to find that when I don't even know what it is? So I gave interest level a 6, so an overall rating of 5.7. Next book, Taino Tales, The Legend of Coqui. According to, I think, Amazon, this is for ages 4 to 8 years. You can see it's a real thin, real short little book. Trigger warning, it is a bit of a sad story involving a death, but they treat it very in an age-appropriate way, I think. Anyway, this one's very educational. I actually gave it a rating of 9. And this goes into some of the mythology of the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, and specifically talking about the Coqui, which is a little frog that's native to Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans love. You can hear it like here in Texas. What I hear at night are crickets. Puerto Rico, you hear the Coqui. The drawings are beautiful. Let me just show you this. I mean, look at this artwork. It's gorgeous. You have some of the language and tells you how to pronounce things. So very educational. I think here at the back, you have here this Taino tidbits, which tells you about the indigenous people. And the Taino were in several islands, not just Puerto Rico. And about words that, like English words that come from the Taino words and that kind of thing. And this is like a version of a story of how the Coqui got its name. The artwork is just beautiful. So I gave it a 9 for education because it does cover a lot of things and it does it in a way where it's expecting the parent to be teaching some to their kid. So I like that. Let's see what else. The quality of the writing, I'd say, is an 8. It was done well. It was nice. Topic was handled well, and I think it felt magical. I like the writing. Interest, I'd say, also an 8 because you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to him? And the artwork and beautiful artwork, and it's short and sweet. This doesn't take the whole long time to read, so I think it'll keep interest. I give it an overall rating of 8.3. I would recommend this one for sure. All right, now for a different situation here. Zandunga, the Taino warrior. Okay, and it says here, this is in English and Spanish. Let me get to my notes. Okay. Okay, this one I got because talking about the Taino warrior. But I will say I think this is supposed to be set more in Haiti or the Dominican Republic. And the ages I would say are for preschool to kinder. So this would be a read aloud. This is a book you would use as a read aloud. So artwork, amazing. And look at this amazing artwork. And I was really attracted to the cover. However, I don't know if it's when I got the book or when I just first saw it online and decided to purchase it. Even though I was attracted to the cover and thought, oh my gosh, I'm definitely getting that book, I immediately assumed that this is historical fiction, like a historical account of a fictional account of a historical tale, like the kind of Taino tales where it gives you a fictional a version of some of the mythology. I thought this might be more like that, but then I looked at the cover and I thought, wow, this is a beautiful illustration. Looking at the little girl, I thought, that ain't right. Because, like I just said, now Puerto Rican people are a mixture of, and I know this isn't set in Puerto Rico, but I would say this is true of all those islands, are a mixture. Right now, we're a mixture of indigenous, African, and European ancestry. And this little girl very much, I think, has a lot of, the hair made me think of more African features. Like a Taino's hair is going to look different than that. That confused me. And so I read through the book and I started looking through it, and like, here's a map, which I'm always excited to see. But then you start looking at, so let's start looking at these characters. Look at the hair. I'm like, is this historical? I know the clothing was different than this, and some of this was like for modesty for a kid's book. It does get into some of the mythology, which is interesting. So that's the educational aspect of it. But so much of it, I thought this is not historical. This, although it presents as if it was. And so I looked into it and noticed here it says, for Sky and Ray, my Taino warrior princesses. My conclusion, they never really say this isn't real. You can see the author's family, and I looked into it, and it seems like this book was really more about like the character Zandunga was inspired by his wife. Apparently, that was a nickname of hers when she was a kid. And so he wanted to more show his daughters in the book and his family. So you can see that the drawings look like them with right down to the modern haircuts and all. And so I realized, oh, this isn't really an educational book. Well, it's a beautiful story. It is a really beautiful story and beautifully illustrated and all. And there is a little bit of an educational element to it. It's because it does have it in both English and Spanish, and we learn a little bit about the mythology. It's not historically accurate, like in hardly any way, even the clothing. Not historically accurate. That was really disappointing to me. And so I wouldn't recommend, if you just want to read your kids a book, that's fine, but be sure to tell them this isn't really how the Taino were, what they look like, or any of that. Like, I would stress that. Yeah, I think I wish it had said, I didn't see where it said in here specifically, hey, warning, this isn't real. This is not a historical fiction, a book of historical fiction for children. Like, it's not that. This is just a story for, almost like he made it for his family, for his kids, and then sold it, which is fine. But if you don't know better, you might think this is how things were and how people looked and how they dressed, and it's not. So because of that, my rating for education is a 2. I gave 1 point for the fact that it's in both English and Spanish. So maybe a Spanish learner, someone who's like intermediate level or more advanced, even can read that out loud. And I gave it a point for the mythology. Like I said, you learn some things about mythology, but so it's just a 2. The quality of the writing, I'd say it was a 7 because it was a good little story. And the interest was an 8 because beautiful artwork, and you want to see what happens. Is our little heroine here able to achieve her goal? So overall rating of 5.7. I would not recommend that for educational purposes. Just as a sweet story. All right, next book, The Golden Flower, a Taino myth from Puerto Rico. And this is another one that's focused on the mythology of Puerto Rico. It's a picture book, typical picture book. So I would say it's for preschoolers or kinder. The artwork is a little bit different. So you can see how the artwork is different. That might keep their education some. There's not a whole lot of writing on each page. I couldn't decide if I liked the artwork or not. It's fine for what it is. It's not my cup of tea, but it is what it is. As far as education goes, even the afterword, even though it's here at the front of the book, this is good to read, which explains a little bit about why this book was written and the mythology. So that has some educational value to it. And even here, the beginning, long ago, the island Puerto Rico is called Boriquen, which is true. This was the name given to it by the first people who lived there, the Taino. So we get into a little bit of the history before going into the mythology. And so for history, I gave it an 8. The quality of the writing was a 5 because it's just basic. It gets the job done. I'm not fitting everything into the screen. Sorry about that. And interest, I'd give it a 6. It didn't really hold my interest, but then again, I'm not a preschooler. It has interesting artwork, but instead of just being like, oh, what beautiful artwork, for me, I like things to look like the way they look. So it wasn't my cup of tea, but some kids might find that really interesting. It might be enough to keep them like, oh, what's the next page going to look like? So I gave it a 6 for interest. So an overall rating of 6.3. I think if you're going to be studying mythology of indigenous peoples, this might be a good one to look at. Okay, what's next? Okay, this next one I really like. It's called Encounter. And I have like special feelings about this one. Look at this artwork, it's amazing. I first learned of this book through a homeschool curriculum that talked about that basically gave you lists of books. I'm not going to say which one it is, but basically gave you lists of books for learning about different historical eras, or so you could do literature based learning with your kids. And it didn't recommend this book because we learn a little bit about the mythology and uh, because these Taino people were not Christians. It angered me. So I was like, well, I got to read about it. So I got it from the library actually first, and then I ended up buying it. And I was so offended by that because this is from the point of view of little Taino boy when Columbus and his ships arrive, and how these Europeans would look to a little Taino boy, and how the Taino try to be so friendly, and they're known for being friendly, and how they were taken advantage of. I thought it was a good response to what I feel is a lot of mythology built up around Columbus. He's seen as a hero. There's a whole Columbus Day. I'm not a fan of Columbus, and I think you'll find a lot of people who feel represented by a book like this are not going to be fans of Columbus. I don't see him as a hero. This book explains about how he kidnapped. Let me show that how they took advantage and kidnapped indigenous some of the Taino and took them, and trigger warning to any Puerto Ricans out there, anybody with indigenous ancestry. And so this little boy is like, he has dreams and he's trying to warn them, and no one listens to him, and just how sad. So it's a sad book. The artwork was really beautiful, but I thought it was a good counterpoint to American mythology when it comes to Columbus, and especially Christian homeschoolers, who it's like you would think that Columbus was included in the Bible. Yeah, there's a lot of, I feel, revisionist history out there, not good for our kids. It comes across more like propaganda than anything else, as far as I'm concerned. So I was really glad to find this book, which is from the point of view of the indigenous people. I am a Christian, and so I will explain to my kids like this is to me this is mythology that's being talked about here. How he sees like some of the dreams and all that. But then again, we can also talk about how God says in the Bible how He will speak to people in dreams. How He's done it in the past and will do it in the future, and is probably doing it right now. So we can handle the mythology aspect of it without completely throwing out what this book is trying to communicate, which is seeing things from the point of view of the people that were being invaded by Europeans. Okay? That's an okay thing to learn about, I think. And that's definitely something I'm teaching my kids. Educational aspect, I would say, is a 9. I thought it was pretty good. Could have been a little bit better, but it was pretty good. Quality of the writing, I think, was 10. I think it was beautifully written. So this is like what I would give a 10, this beautiful writing. And interest level, I would say is an 8 because of the amazing artwork. It is a little bit scary. The artwork is a little bit scary sometimes for little kids. If you have a very sensitive child, look at this picture. That might be a little scary to some kids. And it may be a little confusing because, again, you're getting this from the point of view of little kids. So a little kid who hasn't seen a European before. And so, for example, looking at the skin, the narrative is from the point of view of this kid. And so might have to explain to a child, this is why he's saying that. So it could be a little confusing. That maybe you can have a conversation with your kids about, hey, imagine if the only people you ever saw were people who lived in our town. And then people from far away all of a sudden show up and they look different, they're dressed different, they have a different language. What might you think? So I think actually could teach some empathy. So anyway, I rated the book overall a 9. This is the book that kind of inspired this video. And it was a book written by my baby brother, Eddie Reyes, The Coqui Who Couldn't Coqui. Look at the beautiful artwork here. Now, obviously, I'm a little biased, so I'm not going to rate this book because to me it's a 10. My brother, he's an engineer as well. He's an electrical engineer. But he's a really good writer. So I was really happy that he decided to try to write his first book. And so you can find this on Amazon. I'll put links to all these books below. Anyway, he didn't do the illustrations. He hired someone to do that, and they were done really well as well. And this is a book, and it kind of talks about this a Coqui, the little frog I told you about, but who lives somewhere else and doesn't, maybe feels a little separate from other people because he's not like the or other frogs, because he's not like the other frogs, and decides to go to Puerto Rico to the luminescent lagoon, like I talked about, the bioluminescent bays, to try to find other frogs that look like him, like I was telling you earlier. There's something about seeing people that look like you. And so the name of the frog in this book is Cruz, which is my middle boy's name, and loved that. I love that. And the message of this book about how even when you're different, you're still worthy of love and friendship. And so as far as educational aspects, my mother actually translated it, so it is in English and Spanish. You can learn a little bit in conjunction with this book. You can learn about the Coqui. You find out they come in different colors and they're indigenous to Puerto Rico and what they look like and all that, how they sound. They make that Coqui sound. Cuca, that's, she might not want me to say so, but that's the nickname of someone in my family. So I love that, but they don't like the nickname. So I'm not going to say who it was. I think it's cute and just beautifully done. So it's educational as far as learning about the Coqui, bioluminescent bay, a little bit about Puerto Rico, the parrot. Let's see what else. The Spanish, and also empathy. So educational in all those ways. Like I said, I love my brother's writing. And I think it's interesting because you're like, what's going to happen when he gets to Puerto Rico? And how's this going to work out for him? And it's very colorful and comes in good condition. And he's talked to a couple people about this for their kids, and the kids love the book. So it's a 10 as far as I'm concerned. Very proud of my brother. So that was the last of the physical books that I have. Let me fix my hair. I read a couple books on Kindle Unlimited, like I was telling you earlier. So one was called Lai Lelo Lai for Abuelo and Abuela. I looked at the digital copy of that. I would say that's for preschoolers. How would I rate it educationally? I'd give it an 8 for culture. It goes into the culture of Puerto Rico, and focuses on specific aspects of culture. I feel like it was written more for native Puerto Ricans, and if you're not and you want to use it educationally, you can look a little bit into each of the cultural concepts that are described. And so it could be educational in that way. So because of that, I give it an 8, because those cultural concepts are in a little bit of history and all are presented in a beautiful way with the artwork. The quality of the writing, I gave it a 3 because it needed an editor. It really did. Interest, I would say, I think it's going to depend on if you like the artwork or if your kids like the artwork. I'd say it's 11. I personally love the artwork. I loved it so much that I looked it up. It turns out you can buy those prints and more from the lady who did the artwork. And so I actually bought a couple of them for my mother for Mother's Day. One about a sugarcane farmer, which showed the sugarcane guy who worked on a sugarcane farm, like chopping down sugarcane, because she had a grandfather who did that. And so I really love that. And the other one, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I can't remember if it was making pasteles or if it was making the coffee. One of these that I thought would remind her of her grandmother and all. I really love the artwork. So I gave it an overall rating of a 6. If anything, I'd say the artwork is amazing. Okay, another book I read on Kindle Unlimited was Isabella and the Taino Indians. Educationally, I think this was the one that had the most variety, and it had this little girl, Isabella, who was s trying to learn about Puerto Rican history and culture and all. So for education, I would rate it a 9. The quality of the writing of a 5 because it was not I was hoping it'd be done a little more elegantly than it was. I think it could have been. It gets the job done, but I feel in a clunky way. I felt the value in this book was almost all education, not simply enjoyment. And so, like my brother's book, it's a fun little story, whether or not you learn anything about Puerto Rico. This one, it's not like that. Interest, I'd give it a 6 because you do think, oh, what's the next thing she's going to learn about? But I feel like it could have been fleshed out more and written a little bit better. So overall rating, I gave it a 6.7. I would recommend that one if you want to use that one as a spine for some deeper learning about Puerto Rico, Tainos, or anything like that. So if you were going to pick out one of these books for your kids to read, which would it be? And why would you choose it? Because of the educational value, because of the story, or because of the artwork, maybe. And obviously, my favorite was my brother's. I'll put links to all these books down below. So, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye bye.